Hi everyone, my name is Samantha. I am going to be recording this on my phone and then pointing the screen at my laptop because I just got a Mac like a little bit ago and I don't know how to do voiceover because I can't figure it out. So yeah, so I'm going to do it that way, but it's going to be super easy to understand. So I did my presentation on dystopian science fiction novels and young adult literature, just because I've always been a super big fan of like Harry Potter, Divergent, Hunger Games, all of those, and I really liked the book that we read in class, and I figured that I could write a lot and research a lot about that, so I decided to do that one. So that was just my first slide. So I looked at where it began and Googled that a little bit. And I found that it began with George Orwell's 1984 written in 1949. And this was a book about a post-World War II-ish world, and one of the main character, he decided to write a journal, and if people found out about this journal, he would be killed for going against the government, and then he falls in love with a woman, and then they go on this big, long journey, all this stuff, so it's pretty fascinating. And then more recently, I found that it moved on to The Giver by Lewis Lowry, written in 1993, and a lot of sites that I looked at argue that this was the first young adult novel written from a teenager's perspective. And I guess you could say that George Orwell's was written from a teenager's perspective, but kind of a much older teenager, more so because and it was in a journal type deal, so it was kind of different. But The Giver was strictly written from a teenager's mind. You can definitely tell that a younger teenager was narrating the whole book from beginning to end. And I mean, I'm sure you guys know, but this one is about a boy, and he grows up in this world where everything is given to them, and they're all given different roles to play within their society, and they all go to work and they go to school and they specialize in whatever, and then he realizes that he is destined to be the next giver, and then that's where the story goes from there, and he learns about the other world, I guess you could say, outside of his town, and why everything is how it is, and that one's a really good one too. So I looked at like through the years of dystopian novels, and a lot of them, so it starts with the 1970s, just a little bit, obviously start with 1984 and then it moves on, and then the one article that I read on CNN talked about in the 1980s how the horror books from R.L. Stine were kind of included in that, which I kind of thought was weird because I read a lot of them, and they weren't exactly dystopian, but I guess some of them could be, like, because there were so many of the so many of the stuff that kind of happened, and that was so weird. I don't know. It was a weird like connection that the article made. And then going on to today, the current series of today, like Harry Potter, Divergent, Hunger Games, all that stuff that's in our decade and whatnot. So I looked at why authors chose to write dystopian, because you wouldn't necessarily think that dystopian novels were exactly like relatable to teenagers as much as like writing about high school would be, or like real things that could happen to them could be. And so the article that I read talked about how reading dystopian novels was an escape from reality, which makes the novels much more appealing to teenagers. But I thought this one was really interesting because I guess you read all books to escape from reality, but especially young adult, it kind of feels, I mean, at least for me reading them, it kind of feels like I'm reading reality, which, if that makes any sense. So that's interesting. And then moving on to topics. So they write dystopian for topics that could happen to make you think about the future. And I thought this one was really interesting too, because I mean, especially the Hunger Games and Divergent. Those are more based around a corrupt government, which I'll talk about soon. But stuff that could very well happen. And I think kids realize that whenever they're reading, they're like, "Oh, this could really happen to me." And then the one that we read in class, that one especially was very realistic, and I felt that teenagers reading that one could definitely see the fact that a meteor could very well hit the moon, and all those things could happen, which is kind of crazy to think about. But and then that these books often parallel current events in our society. So going back to the Hunger Games, that's just me because I talk about that later on. That one especially because it happened because of so many wars. I mean, if you look at the news, there's so many wars happening and all that stuff. And I feel like a lot of the dystopian novels are just an extension of today, and a lot of them could preface, not really are going to, but could preface what could happen decades from now. And so, obviously, I use the Hunger Games as an example. So, what I said, it shows kids that it could happen today. States that are run by corrupt governments can go awry, and that's what the movie's about. Everyone knows, but the movie's about a girl who lives in a district a pretty poor district, and there's 13 districts in the whole country, and the government dictates food and work and all that stuff, and every year they have the Hunger Games, which is a fight to the death of teenagers, to remember the big war that separated the country into 13 districts. So, yeah, so that's what the movie's about. And then the book that is a movie. And the article that I read pointed out that it's super popular because it's realistic but still really fictional. And I was kind of thinking about this because the Hunger Games was booming. Every single teenager and every adult was reading it. And I was thinking about it in the context of young adult, and I was like, I wonder why it's so popular. Just because it's not exactly relatable. It's not exactly anything that teenagers have gone through today, at least in America. It's not at all relatable, but the CNN article that I read said that even though the actual storyline's fiction and not relatable to teens, the emotions that the main characters are feeling are relatable to readers, which kind of answered all my questions, actually. And it made so much more sense because Katniss falls in love, obviously, and then she has to leave the person that she loves only to fall in love with someone else, and all this stuff, and that's super relatable to teens. And I think that putting it in the context of that sort of society, that sort of dystopian society, kind of makes it that much more real to the readers. It makes it more relatable to them and makes them more hooked. And that's why we're excited. So yeah, I guess just in conclusion, just thinking about dystopian novels and how, I'm actually going to switch this around to my face, hang on. Okay, redo. Yeah, so in conclusion, just talking about, all this stuff and the, dystopian literature and all that stuff, I think it's just a good current trend, and I think that it's good that a lot more authors are writing about dystopian novels, and it's just a different change than just the typical like high school drama stuff. That, I mean, not that that's not significant, because it is, but I think it's a good twist on the emotions that teenagers are going through, and it's a good read. And yeah, so thanks for listening and getting through this awkward turnaround of the phone. Have a good night. Thanks. Bye.